Before I unfold the tale of how everything came apart, there's something you must understand. There is a profound agony in pouring your heart and soul into something, only to be met with the harsh reality that it falls short of expectations. At times, the most profound scars are inflicted by those you nurtured, the very souls who once grasped your hand in innocence and now struggle to meet your gaze. In my earnest attempt to assist, I found myself stripped of everything I held dear along the way. Stay with me until the conclusion, and you'll understand why departing was the most remarkable choice I ever made. Be sure to subscribe to the channel and share your location in the comments. In the early days of March in Ohio, the air was crisp, allowing one to see their breath in the morning light, yet it was not so frigid as to confine one indoors for the entirety of the day. It lingers in my mind, that moment in the garden, where I was meticulously deadheading the final remnants of frostbitten mums when the phone's shrill ring broke the stillness. It was indeed Brian. His voice was gentle, teetering on the edge of caution. "Hello, Mom. How have you been?" It had been more than 3 weeks since I last heard from him, which was not out of the ordinary. Ever since he tied the knot with Tiffany, our conversations have dwindled in both frequency and length, marked by a veneer of politeness yet tinged with an unmistakable distance. I assured him I was all right, that I had been occupied with the yard and sifting through some of Harold's old belongings. That was untruthful. Since the funeral, Harold's closet remained untouched. The scent of his old jackets had the power to bring me to my knees. Yet, it was a truth Brian remained blissfully unaware of. "You've been solitary for quite some time now," he remarked. "I simply find the thought of you wandering through that vast old house alone rather unsettling." A nervous chuckle escaped my lips. I have persevered. Silence envelopes the space, yet it resonates with the essence of belonging. Then arrived the stillness, that uncertainty woven into his voice, the sort that reveals what follows has long been practiced. In a recent conversation with Tiffany, we came to the conclusion that it might be a good idea for you to stay with us for a time. My heart leapt. Coexist with you? Indeed, it would certainly benefit the children. Your absence is felt deeply, and we have that extra room, you see? You would not obstruct the path. I hesitated before responding. There was an unsettling quality to it, though not necessarily negative, merely unforeseen. During my most recent visit, Tiffany hardly managed to utter more than 2 sentences in my direction. She was perpetually occupied, perpetually elsewhere, perpetually tethered to her phone. Even then, Brian bore the weight of weariness upon him. More slender than normal, his eyes were hollow, as if he hadn't rested in ages. Yet, the thought of drawing nearer to my grandchildren awakened a profound feeling within me. Perhaps I was being a bit foolish. Perhaps I allowed my solitude to overshadow my discernment. "I will consider it," I replied to him. I pondered over the idea for an entire week. As I wandered through the desolate rooms of my home, I passed by the family photographs, now shrouded in dust, the worn armchair where Harold once found solace in slumber, and the teacups that had long been untouched, remnants of a time gone by. I reminisced about those solitary evenings when I prepared a meal for myself, leaving the television on to fill the silence with another voice echoing in the space. In that moment, I resolved to take action. A suitcase was packed with care. Not all things, sufficient for an extended sojourn. I departed my home just as I discovered it. Silent, somewhat melancholic yet resilient, I made my way to Brian's place. 2 towns away, burdened by sorrow yet clinging to a fragile hope. As I arrived, there was no one to welcome me at the door. Tiffany swung the door open after my second knock echoed through the hallway. Her lips remained uncurled. "You're early," she remarked, moving to the side. The aroma of takeout mingled with the unmistakable scent of diapers in the house. The floor lay strewn with toys. The television emitted a cacophony of animated antics that were unfamiliar to me. Brian descended the stairs, cradling the baby on his hip, and wrapped me in a brief embrace. In haste, the boys scarcely lifted their gazes. He gestured toward the guest room. "The space has been cleared for your convenience. While it may not be flawless, it certainly holds value." As I crossed the threshold, I entered the space. It remained untouched. Boxes cluttered the space. A shattered lamp stood forlorn in the corner, and an air mattress served in place of a proper bed. Lacking closet space, there's nowhere for my belongings to reside. Yet I smiled regardless. "It'll do," I murmured gently. On that first night, I found myself stretched out on the air mattress, gazing up at the ceiling, absorbing the echoes of a house that felt foreign to me. I reassured myself that this was just a phase, that my presence was essential, that this was the essence of familial bonds. Yet, I couldn't dispel the notion that I had stumbled into a situation that was less about my solitude and more about their desire for something I could provide. Unbeknownst to me, I had just entered a realm of gradual, hushed betrayal, the sort that doesn't shatter you in a single blow. It erodes gradually, moment by moment, until all that remains is emptiness. The ensuing days were marked by quiet pauses and understated rejections. I made an effort to be of assistance, extending my hand to cook, to tidy up, and to keep an eye on the boys while Tiffany immersed herself in her phone or vanished upstairs for what felt like an eternity. Yet, no matter my efforts, nothing appeared to resonate as intended. Tiffany scarcely glanced in my direction, and when she finally did, her expression lingered in a space that seemed to straddle the line between feigned courtesy and subdued annoyance. Brian was perpetually occupied, whether it was laboring into the late hours, striding anxiously through the kitchen during tense phone conversations, or seeking solace in the garage with a beer in hand. I inquired of him once whether all was well, and he responded with a half-hearted smile that failed to illuminate his eyes. "We're simply overwhelmed, Mom. You're familiar with the experience. 2 children, expenses, employment. It is quite substantial." I inclined my head in agreement. I was aware of how it was. I nurtured him through more challenging times than these with far fewer resources. However, I did not express that. I continued to smile, persistently extending my hand to assist in any manner possible. One morning, Tiffany intercepted me in the hallway. "Could you please refrain from using the washer during the day? Thank you. The electric bill has soared to an unexpectedly high amount." I blinked. Naturally, I was unaware. I completed just a single load. "It's fine," she interrupted, turning on her heel and departing before I could complete my thought. Once again, she let out a noticeable sigh when I forgot to turn off the bathroom light. Next came the heating. Next came the water. Each action I took, folding the children's clothes, sweeping the floor, or even picking up groceries, felt as though it was scrutinized with a silent disapproval. And then the bills arrived. Brian mentioned it as if it were a trivial matter during dinner with the guys, who were half dozing off at the table. "I realize this is somewhat uncomfortable," he remarked, his gaze averted from mine. "However, circumstances are quite constrained at the moment. I would be truly grateful if you could assist with the mortgage, even just until we manage to get back on track." My gaze fell upon him, a wave of disbelief washing over me. "Certainly," I replied almost instinctively. "Simply let me know what you require." That very week, I reached into my savings, moving just enough to cover half of the monthly payment, convinced it would be a solitary act. Yet, the following month, he inquired once more. And then the next. It transformed into something anticipated, rather than something sought after. I remained silent. My desire was to offer assistance. I reassured myself that this is the essence of motherhood. Yet, beneath the surface, I started to sense that a boundary had been breached, not by the request itself, but by the stark indifference with which it was met. I started to perceive details that had previously escaped my attention. Brian's phone vibrated persistently in the stillness of the night, and I caught a glimpse of him hastily navigating to another tab as I moved past him at the kitchen counter. Tiffany's shopping bags, bearing the insignia of stores I recognized as high-end, belied her incessant grumbling about finances. And forever, there lingered a tension that seemed to saturate the air, akin to humidity, dense, unseen, and stifling. One evening, I prepared a roast, the very sort that Brian cherished during his childhood. I arranged the table, meticulously folding the napkins just as I once did in the comfort of my home. I considered that perhaps this could serve as a means to bridge the gap, to smooth the rough contours. However, Tiffany chose to remain upstairs until we had finished our meal. She cast a fleeting look at the untouched plate I had reserved for her, met my gaze and remarked, "Next time, just ask. I tend to avoid red meat." She left the meal untouched, opting instead for a protein bar from the pantry before retreating upstairs. I lingered at the table, the remnants of the gathering fading into silence, my gaze fixed on the untouched roast as the dishwasher's soft hum filled the air. I felt a profound sense of unwelcomeness in this place. I proved to be of value.
A wallet, a caregiver, a housekeeper.
And still I lingered, for my love for them endured, and I clung to the belief that I could somehow make it all come together. Yet the walls were beginning to fracture, and I remained unaware of just how invisible I truly was. The impending moment that would unravel everything loomed near, poised to emerge from the lips of the very individual who had perpetually rendered me unseen. It unfolded on a Thursday. The boys were in a particularly irritable mood that day. Excessive exposure to screens, insufficient fresh air. Tiffany had just stepped out of the bedroom, while Brian remained tethered to his laptop in the kitchen since the break of dawn. Much of my day was consumed by soothing outbursts, tidying up juice that had been spilled, and folding laundry that belonged to someone else. By the time dinner arrived, fatigue had settled in. I prepared a chicken casserole, the sort that nourishes a family and extends the bounty of leftovers. I arranged the table as I always did, summoned everyone to join, and endeavored to mask the reality, to convince myself that this was just another day, that I had a rightful place here. Tiffany perched opposite me, her fingers dancing over her phone as she nibbled between mouthfuls. Brian sat in quiet contemplation, his gaze locked onto the glowing screen of his laptop, which rested beside his plate. The children squabbled, prodded at their meals, and ultimately rose from the table before completing their plates. In an effort to spark a dialogue, I remarked softly, if we gathered around the table for meals more frequently, perhaps the boys would have a better appetite. Tiffany kept her gaze fixed downward. Brian took a moment to clear his throat. "We find ourselves feeling a bit overwhelmed, Mom." At that moment, Tiffany lifted her gaze. Her voice carried a monotone quality, yet it was tinged with an underlying edge that hinted at deeper emotions. "Maggie, you have a knack for slipping in those little remarks, don't you? As if we are incapable of managing our own home?" I blinked. I didn't intend for it to come across that way. I was about to speak, but she interrupted, her fork clattering against the plate as she set it down decisively. "Your words carry weight, yet they seem to lack the substance of genuine contribution when it comes to offering suggestions." The words struck with the force of a slap. The atmosphere felt as though it had been drawn away, leaving an emptiness in its wake. Brian remained silent. He merely cast his gaze upon his plate. I gazed at them, immobilized. My hands quivered beneath the table. I parted my lips to speak, yet silence enveloped me. In that moment, a truth I had been evading for weeks finally dawned on me. I felt like an outsider in this family. I existed as a weight masquerading as a support, a mere stand-in until they found their breath once more, an entity to be utilized, not one to be revered. I rose from the table, my meal left unfinished, and carried my plate to the sink, where I rinsed it quietly. My heart pounded in my chest as I made my way down the hallway, entering the makeshift room they had prepared for me. I perched on the brink of the air mattress, my gaze fixed on the floor for what felt like an eternity. That night, slumber eluded me. I reflected on all the years I supported Brian through turbulent emotions, the nights I endured hunger to ensure he was fed, and the sacrifices I made willingly, without ever being prompted. At this moment, I found myself falling short in my contributions. After settling half of their mortgage, preparing their meals, tidying their home, nurturing their children, I still felt inadequate. With the dawn, a transformation stirred within me. Breakfast was enveloped in a heavy silence. Tiffany averted her gaze from mine. Brian carried on as if nothing had transpired. I remained silent. I was unable to, not without shedding tears. I would not grant them that. Returning to the guest room, I zipped up my suitcase and started to fold the few garments I had brought from my true home, the one I ought to have never abandoned. At that moment, my gaze fell upon it. Outside the bedroom door, my suitcase stands propped against the hallway wall, already packed, already waiting, as though they were aware. It felt as though fate had sealed my path the instant Tiffany uttered those words. A fragment of my being shattered, yet another essence within me, the more profound one, solidified. I had reached my limit. Unbeknownst to them, they were on the brink of losing far more than merely their housekeeper, their unpaid nanny, or their emergency fund. They stood on the precipice of losing the one individual who would have moved mountains to safeguard them. And I would ensure they experienced the full weight of that loss. I failed to utter a farewell. I had the desire to, at least to the boys. Yet, I found myself unable to rouse them from their slumber. They bore no guilt in any of this. They made the choice to regard me as if I were expendable. Yet, I was acutely aware that if I caught sight of their drowsy eyes and tiny hands stretching out for just one more embrace, I would find it impossible to walk away. Thus I refrained. A note was placed upon the kitchen counter, only a single line, inscribed in the elegant cursive I mastered during my time in Catholic school. I appreciate the opportunity to be here. As the first light of dawn broke, I stepped through the front door, suitcase in hand. Not a single soul took notice. No one intervened. Brian remained at the top of the stairs, not descending. Tiffany remained steadfastly behind the bedroom door, not daring to glance outside. The stillness of that house affirmed all that I had long suspected. As I drove away, the path before me became a haze, obscured by the tears that fell silently. I made an effort to hold back my tears, not due to any remorse about my departure, but rather a sorrow for ever believing I had a place there. As I navigated my way into the familiar confines of my driveway, the clock had just ticked past 8. The house loomed as a relic of unfulfilled hopes. A slight droop, somewhat neglected yet undeniably my own, patiently awaiting my arrival. As I swung the front door wide, a wave of stale air washed over me, carrying with it the essence of forgotten moments and the weight of years gone by, a silence that resonated through the air. I wandered from room to room, my fingers grazing the furniture as if it could vanish at any moment beneath my touch. The wedding photo of Harold and me remained perched on the fireplace mantel. The bed remained perfectly arranged. The final sheets upon which he rested remained perfectly folded. The slippers rested precisely in the spot I had last placed them. In an instant, a wave of foolishness washed over me, for departing from it, for believing that solace could be discovered in any other place. Prior to delving into the unpacking, I settled at the kitchen table and launched my banking app. I navigated to the section for automatic transfers, the ones I had arranged to encompass a portion of Brian and Tiffany's hypotheca. I gazed at them, my heart racing in my chest. Then I pressed the cancel button. Every single one. The sound echoed, a rhythmic series of clicks. And then I lingered in that space for what felt like an eternity, allowing the silence to envelop me like a comforting shroud. On that particular afternoon, a message from Brian arrived on my phone. "Hello. I wanted to see if you arrived home safely." I chose not to respond. 2 hours passed, and another message arrived. "Though the situation has become peculiar, perhaps we could have a conversation in the near future." Yet I remained silent. As darkness descended, the phone began to ring. I allowed it to slip into voicemail.
No regrets.
Tiffany's words went unacknowledged, merely troubled that his safety net had slipped away into the night. I warmed a frozen meal and took a seat at my own table for the first time in months. I consumed little, yet each morsel was savored with a sense of pride I hadn't experienced in years. They believed they could cast me aside as if I were a tattered old couch, no longer fit for purpose. Yet they had committed a singular error. They believed I would remain silent. They remained blissfully unaware of the price they would pay for my absence, while I was just starting to grasp the worth they had so carelessly dismissed. The next time I received word from them, it would not be a mere casual inquiry. It would resonate as a poignant plea for assistance. The initial week upon returning home resembled the sensation of emerging from a prolonged, weary dream. I meticulously cleaned each room, from ceiling to floor, not out of necessity, but rather for my own sense of clarity. I sought to reclaim the space, a necessary act to remind myself of my existence beyond their expectations. Once I existed beyond the confines of being their answer. Yet, Despite the windows flung wide and the sun casting its golden glow upon the hardwood floors, an oppressive silence lingered in the air. I found myself longing for the company of the boys. Their laughter echoed, their small hands grasping at my sleeve. I longed for their chaotic inquiries and spontaneous embraces. Tiffany's glares and Brian's passivity were hardly things I found myself longing for. Yet, the children, that pain lingers. Several days later, I procured a gift for them. I'm aware of your thoughts. They were unworthy of it. Perhaps not. Yet the boys did. Unbeknownst to them, the secrets their parents had woven remained shrouded in silence, leaving them oblivious to the whispered betrayals and the profound ache of being cast aside by one's own flesh and blood. I ordered 2 new iPads, preloaded them with educational games and drawing apps, and selected a soft leather case for each, navy blue for Jake and forest green for Liam. I meticulously wrapped them, penned a heartfelt note, and opted for the premium overnight delivery service. The message read, "Even when distance separates us, my presence remains close to you. Affection. Beloved Grandma." Silence echoed from Brian. Silence speaks volumes, and I appreciate the absence of words. As expected, there was nothing from Tiffany. Yet I was certain they had received the packages. I received confirmation of the tracking. A week later, I caught a glimpse of the boys on Tiffany's Instagram story. They engaged with the iPads, smiles stretching across their faces. Tiffany failed to tag me, neglected to mention my name. Yet I beheld the smiles. That sufficed for the moment. Once more, silence enveloped the scene. I immersed myself in puzzles, lost myself in books, and took long, contemplative walks around the block. I held back my tears, not in a voice that carries. Yet, each time I walked by the corridor where Harold's coat remained draped, a constriction gripped my throat. One night, unexpectedly, I awoke to a peculiar knot in my stomach. A whisper within urged me to examine my finances. Since canceling the transfers, it had slipped from my mind. Nevertheless, I accessed my bank account and discovered nothing amiss. What truly captured my attention, however, was an email alert from 2 months ago. A box I had yet to unseal amidst the whirlwind of relocation. The source was my bank, a notice regarding a significant withdrawal that Brian had executed. Funds that had not been allocated to the mortgage. My heart quickened. I delved further, retrieved previous statements. Uncertainty clouded my search, leaving me questioning what I truly sought. Yet, an unsettling feeling gnawed at me, whispering that something was amiss. The figures failed to align. I noticed several charges from a company that was unfamiliar to me, an entity shrouded in ambiguity. I searched for it online. It was a place of chance and risk. My gaze lingered on the screen, utterly bewildered. More than a dozen charges, stretched across several weeks, a sum of hundreds of dollars on each occasion. At times, there are stretches of days between us. Throughout my time beneath their roof, all the while, he was recounting to me the struggles of how tight things had become. As he allowed his wife to demean me, as I settled his expenses, it struck me with the force of a gut-wrenching blow. He didn't merely take advantage of me. He deceived me, not merely through absence. Yet, he was fully aware that he was pouring my money into a pit from which he could never escape. Moreover, he failed to seek assistance. He concealed it beneath a veneer of insincere courtesy and extended pauses. On that particular night, I found myself seated in the living room. The lights dimmed. The azure luminescence of the computer screen danced upon the walls, creating an interplay of shadows. I reflected on each moment when I thought I was offering him my support, offering him my unwavering support, rescuing him, and came to understand that he was allowing me to sink while he struggled to stay afloat. I held back my tears. I refrained from screaming. I merely remained seated. For the first time in my existence, I experienced an emotion I had never known in relation to my own child. Bitterness, not the keen variety, yet the gradual, corrosive type that gnaws at your very bones. A realization born from the understanding that your affection was turned into a tool of harm. In that instant, I realized that everything between us had irrevocably changed. With the dawn of a new day, I found myself transformed. I felt disconnected from my true self. not the version of myself that once made excuses. To avert one's gaze, I sensed a heightened clarity, chillier, as if a long-broken piece had finally found its rightful place after years of being out of sync. I refrained from messaging Brian. I chose not to confront him. What was the purpose? He would simply refute it, reduce it to its essence, attribute it to stress, or Tiffany, or existence. I was well acquainted with the rhythm of that dance. I had observed Harold unravel his own secrets more times than I wished to admit. Yet this was not a tale centered on Harold. This narrative centered around my experiences. That day, I took the step of opening a new savings account, a Brian beyond reach. I relinquished all that remained in my possession. The previous one has been closed. I revoked the card I had previously given him just to be safe. Erased every automatic payment linked to his name. Subsequently, I replaced the locks on my front door. The scene unfolded with a palpable intensity. I was aware of that, yet it resonated with a sense of correctness, as if it were a sacred ceremony, bridging the gap between the woman I once was and the woman I am evolving into. A week later, the call commenced. Initially, it was merely Brian. Informal check-ins. Merely reaching out to extend a warm greeting. I found myself longing for the company of the boys. Yet, I detected the sharpness in his tone, the palpable tension. His call held a purpose beyond mere conversation. Then the inquiries began to surface. Hello, did the bank reach out to you? An unusual occurrence transpired with my account. It seems there may have been an error regarding the mortgage. Perhaps you overlooked the possibility of... I chose not to respond. Allow each call to gracefully transition to voicemail. The messages began to accumulate, reminiscent of overdue invoices. Tiffany mentioned that you've updated your number. Are you all right? Your behavior has been rather unusual. May we engage in a conversation? Kindly. No. Negative. We were unable to. I observed from afar as the fissures in their seemingly flawless abode widened. Tiffany began to share fewer photographs. As she smiled, it bore the weight of weariness. Compelled. The children's garments appeared more worn and aged. The background is more cluttered. The tone has shifted. I sensed it. The funds were dwindling away. Then arrived the true indication. The moment struck me as a profound validation I hadn't realized I was seeking. A correspondence from the financial institution, sent to me in error. Or perhaps it was intentional, as I had previously co-signed something I scarcely comprehended. A notice of impending foreclosure. I gazed at the word delinquent as if it were etched in flames. On that very night, Brian made another call. I chose not to respond. He opted to send a text instead. I understand that you're feeling upset. However, mother, assistance is essential. Only this time. Kindly, there will be no expressions of regret. There was no recognition of the gambling, the fabrications, the treachery, only despair. And I shall confess it, a fragment of my being longed to mend it, to set all things in order, to embody the nurturing figure who arrives just in time, who emerges as the hero of the moment, a woman who reclaims her value through acts of sacrifice. Yet that fragment of my being was fading away, deprived by countless years of unreciprocated generosity. Instead, I took a seat and penned a letter, not for Brian, not for Tiffany, for my own reflection. I cataloged all that I had offered, all the bills I had settled, each and every favor, each journey, each dining experience, each sacrifice. Thereafter, I inscribed my thoughts below it, yet it remained insufficient. That sentence gazed at me as if it were a judgment. It was indeed the truth. At long last, I had ceased my attempts to revise it. They were on the brink of discovering what existence resembled in my absence. And I was on the brink of discovering what life resembled when I prioritized myself above all else. Vanished without a trace. Not in a physical sense. I remained within the familiar confines of my home, traversing the same streets, and purchasing my groceries at the ever-familiar corner store. Yet, in the realms of emotion, digital presence, and spirituality, I disappeared. I deactivated my Facebook account. I've severed all communication with Brian by blocking his number. I have updated my email address, disabled notifications for all applications. Silence was a necessity for me. Not the burdensome, agonizing sort I had endured since Harold's passing, but a different kind altogether. Pristine stillness, a type that creates room for something greater. My journey began with modest steps. A stroll each morning, merely a 20-minute stroll through my neighborhood. Beyond the familiar mailboxes, the incessant barking of dogs, and the hedges I had encountered countless times before. Yet now, through a transformed lens, the air carried a chill, sharper, as if it contained a deeper truth, as if it had the power to slice through denial. Subsequently, I enrolled in therapy. Not due to my shattered state. Perhaps I was, after all. Yet, I found myself yearning for a companion who would simply listen, free from the burdens of manipulation, guilt, or demands. During the initial 3 sessions, tears flowed freely from my eyes. It had been years since I had shed tears in the presence of another soul. I revealed it all to her, concerning Harold's subtle self-centeredness, concerning the distance that Brian maintains. Tiffany's contempt is palpable. It was during that moment when I caught Tiffany ridiculing my attire to a friend over speakerphone, concerning the meals for which they offered no gratitude, reflecting on the moments when Brian would affectionately refer to me as Mama, especially in times of need, and Ma when he chose silence over conversation, reflecting on the countless ways I supported him through his childhood, his college years, his first car, and even his wedding suit, and now his mortgage, unwittingly nurturing his dependence, all the while being led to believe I fell short. My therapist remained mostly silent, yet her gaze met mine, truly observed, and in that moment it encompassed all that mattered. Next, I retrieved my old sewing machine from the attic. It had remained untouched since the days before Harold fell ill. In the days when I crafted costumes for school productions, costumes for Brian this Halloween, soft cushions crafted for the church bazaar. I brushed away the dust, applied oil to the joints, and resumed my stitching once more. Initially, it was merely a process of repair. Worn towels, faded garments. However, before long, I found myself crafting tote bags, aprons, personalized baby blankets. I established an online store. Nothing of great significance, unassuming simplicity, exclusively mine, and they were purchased by many. Messages of gratitude arrived from unfamiliar faces, requested additional information. I paid the full price. They remarked that my stitching brought to mind the work of their own grandmothers. After a long stretch, I finally felt appreciated. Not in the role of a mother, not in the capacity of a helper, not in the capacity of a wallet. Yet as I am. On a serene afternoon, I cracked open a fresh journal. The pages lay pristine, unblemished by time. I inscribed the initial line with bold strokes of deep black ink. I refuse to be seen as a burden. I exist in plain sight. I am not to be cast aside. And beneath that, I am a woman worthy of tranquility. It transformed into my guiding principle. I kept my actions to myself, revealing nothing to anyone. I found it unnecessary. Gradually, I found myself transforming into a person I had not recognized in ages. Not merely a survivor, but a true embodiment of resilience and growth. And in the interim, the world I had departed was beginning to fracture. It has been more than 3 weeks since I last heard from Brian. Silence prevails. No texts available. Silence on the line. No desperate pleas for forgiveness. Initially, the silence felt peculiar, strange indeed, yet devoid of pain, simply serene. The silence that follows the abrupt cessation of a fire alarm, leaving only the echo of a persistent ringing in your ears. One often remains oblivious to the volume of noise until silence envelopes the space. Yet, gradually, indications of their disintegration started to emerge, delicate, akin to wisps of smoke curling beneath a shut door. Tiffany's Instagram has undergone a transformation. She once shared meticulously arranged photos of the boys dressed in coordinated outfits, artistry in a cup, fresh home embellishments. Everywhere, radiant filters and beaming grins abound. In an instant, the number of pictures diminished. The captions have become more concise. The smiles faded away, and then silence reigned. I made it a point to check in once a week simply to observe. Let's refer to it as a sense of wonder. Consider it a matter of concern. I reassured myself that it wasn't born of spite. I simply sought to understand the extent to which the resonance of my absence had traveled. On a quiet afternoon, as I perused the local neighborhood app, a listing caught my eye. A sectional sofa, lightly used and ready for a new home. It is essential to collect. Immediate attention required. The couch belonged to them. The throw pillows were familiar to me. A week later, designer handbags available for purchase. Feel free to reach out for more information. Then arrived the car. The SUV belonging to Tiffany, the very one she had adamantly insisted no one else could drive, was conspicuously absent from the driveway, captured in the background of a photo shared by another. A battered old sedan now occupies the space. Their image was slowly dissolving into the ether. The polish was removed. The following occasion I ventured into town. I spotted Brian at the grocery store. Isolated. He either failed to notice my presence, or perhaps he chose to feign ignorance. He donned the very hoodie to which I had stitched a patch 3 winters past. His cart contained nondescript cereal, frozen pizza, baby wipes, devoid of steaks, wine, or anything organic. He appeared weary, empty. I observed him from the shadows of a towering shelf filled with canned soup. In that delicate moment, a part of me yearned to approach him, greet with a warm hello, inquire about the well-being of the boys, extend a hand of assistance. Yet, Tiffany's voice echoed in my mind, sharp and incisive. Your contributions do not warrant the making of suggestions. I allowed him to move ahead. That evening, I prepared a genuine feast for myself, neither frozen nor microwaved. With a flicker of flame, I ignited a candle, filled a glass with rich wine, and adorned the table with the finest plates. Exclusively for my own delight, the dwelling exuded warmth, a sanctuary of safety and tranquility. On Christmas Eve, a sudden knock echoed through the stillness of the night. Surprise was etched on my face. I hadn't anticipated a visitor. I cautiously glanced through the window. There is no vehicle parked in the driveway. A delivery box rested on my porch,
Vast.
enveloped in a layer of brown paper. Within lay 2 diminutive parcels. A letter intended for Grandma. The other one is for Mimi, the moniker Liam began using for me during his early attempts at speech. My breath hitched. Within, the identical iPads I had dispatched to them weeks prior, meticulously encased once more. Yet now they bore embellishments. Adhesive embellishments. Shimmer. One of them bore a note inscribed in large, playful letters, reminiscent of a child's hand. Your absence is felt deeply. Wishing you a joyous Christmas. Return to us swiftly. As I settled onto the floor, tears streamed down my cheeks. Not intended for Brian. Not intended for Tiffany. For the little ones. For what they found themselves ensnared in. For that which eluded their comprehension. I felt an overwhelming urge to rush towards them, keep them close, convey to them that none of this rests upon their shoulders. Instead, I made my way to the hallway closet, retrieved 2 new jackets I had purchased on clearance but never sent off, and started to fill another box. I infused it with affection cloaked in necessities. Literature, cozy socks.
Petite plétine.
Additionally, a further observation. A grandmother's love is boundless and requires no approval. It belongs to you always. The following morning, I placed it at the post office. There is no return address provided. Without anticipation. Simply a door. Defined by limits. For the sake of understanding, they had to learn. I would not vanish into thin air. Yet, I would no longer serve as their cornerstone. They would need to undertake the task of rebuilding it on their own. The Christmas season arrived and departed, leaving me with a sense of wonder I hadn't felt in many years. Stillness envelopes the surroundings, yet, belonging to me, the tree was adorned by my hands alone. Hung Harold's cherished ornament near the pinnacle and illuminated a solitary candle beside his photograph on the mantel. I did not prepare a grand meal. I have just baked my mother's delightful cinnamon bread, the one she crafted on snowy mornings, allowing the aroma to envelop the entire house. Silence reigned, devoid of any shouts. Order prevails. No frantic efforts to dazzle those who were indifferent. Only tranquility reigned. Yet, even tranquility casts its own shadows. I found myself longing for the company of the boys. The echo of their laughter, a melody that once danced off the walls, is sorely missed. The manner in which Jake would nestle against me on the couch, reminiscent of a contented cat. The manner in which Liam attempted to articulate words that were far too grand for his small frame. I found myself pondering the nature of their Christmas celebration. A few days later, the answer arrived, enveloped in the stillness of Instagram, accompanied only by a single message from Brian. "I trust your holiday was enjoyable, Mom." "Absolutely not. Your absence was felt." Negative. "The boys inquired about your whereabouts." Merely that solitary, chilling statement. Yet I was already aware of the nature of their holiday. The voids were unmistakable. No photographs of Christmas. There are no coordinating pajamas available. No adorned tree. And then it came into view. A community classifieds announcement following the Christmas festivities. Immediate attention required. In search of part-time babysitting opportunities. Hours that adapt to your needs. It is essential to ensure reliability. A background check is necessary. The poster featured Tiffany. My heart both tightened and expanded simultaneously. Assistance was required. Not a gift. Not any longer. Support was essential for them. Elements I had once delivered with unwavering regularity. As if inhaling life itself, without ever receiving gratitude for. I might have made a call. I might have extended my hand, yet I did not. In place of that, I chose to pursue a different path. I dispatched yet another package to the boys. This one is meticulously crafted. Within, cozy winter coats await, artisanal scarves, fresh volumes, and diminutive wooden playthings. Yet, there exists an additional element. 2 photographs in frames. A moment captured with Jake. Another encounter with Liam, captured during our last cookie-making adventure. Those smiles were genuine. The joy was complete. At last, there lay one final envelope. To Brian and Tiffany. Within, a card awaits. At the forefront, a delicate watercolor depiction of a tree shedding its leaves. Within the depths, inscribed with a pen. Love does not exist in solitude. Respect is not a choice. It is a necessity. Assistance is not eternal. There is no signature. There are no threats present. Only the truth. Time slipped away. Then a week passed. On a certain afternoon, the sound of my doorbell echoed through the quiet of my home. Upon opening the door, I discovered a box waiting for me on the porch. There is no return label available. Enclosed within a layer of brown paper and secured with Scotch tape. The pair of photo frames. Returned, yet the coats and books had vanished. Upon the reverse side of the card I had dispatched, a fresh line appeared, inscribed in Brian's distinctive handwriting. "We comprehend. We shall find a way." I lingered in that moment, card clutched tightly, my heart pounding in my chest. He was beginning to understand. Not entirely. Not at this moment. Yet the fissures began to morph into a mirror of sorts. The forthcoming step promised to be excruciating. Dedicated to him, for her, in honor of the boys. Yet I would refrain from intervening. At times, love requires a retreat, allowing them the space to stumble and rise on their own. At last, they discover the art of standing. It was a Tuesday evening when the call arrived. As I meticulously folded the laundry, each piece of fabric found its place. A quiet rhythm to the mundane task. A mundane task that quietly occupies the void, remaining unnoticed in its simplicity. The device vibrated softly against the surface of the counter. I nearly refrained from responding, yet a whisper within urged me to do so. Brian's voice was hoarse, as if sleep had eluded him. "Mother," he uttered. "Kindly, I must see you." His tone held no trace of bitterness. There shall be no manipulation through guilt. It was a sound I hadn't encountered in ages. Truthfulness. I did not express my agreement. I did not decline. I simply informed him that I would be home the following day, should he wish to pay a visit. As the clock struck p.m., the distinct sound of tires crunching over my gravel drive reached my ears. I glanced through the window and caught sight of his car. Not the old SUV, but rather a compact sedan that appeared as if it had been borrowed or purchased at a bargain. He ascended the steps with a deliberate slowness, as if his body bore a weight greater than it once did. As I swung the door open, a wave of unfamiliarity washed over me. I could hardly place him. He had shed some pounds. His eyes appeared hollow, and his cheeks were devoid of color. The assured slouch that had become his trademark, a habit he adopted after tying the knot with Tiffany, had vanished. What remained was an essence unrefined, unclothed. "May I enter?" he inquired. For a fleeting moment I paused. Then they gracefully stepped aside. He perched on the edge of the couch, as if fearing it might cast him off. He sat with his hands clasped in his lap, nervously twisting them together. "I made a mistake," he uttered. "There's no need to articulate it. I am already aware." I remained quiet. He surveyed my house as if it were a novel landscape unfolding before his eyes. The weathered armchair, a towering stack of books, rests upon the coffee table. The candle flickers softly, its flame dancing atop the mantel. I had no idea just how serene this place could be. He spoke in a hushed tone, yet I remained silent. And then he shattered. "I find myself in a predicament, Mother," he murmured softly. I believe I have developed an obsession with online betting." I made an effort to halt. I assure you I truly did. Yet, whenever the weight of the world pressed down on me, I would reach for the phone. Tiffany, she simply doesn't grasp it. Her sole desire is to reclaim the funds. That is the sole subject of her conversation. He took a moment to gather his thoughts. His words caught in his throat. "I have brought about my own downfall. The residence is currently in arrears on its financial obligations. The children inquire about the absence of warmth on certain nights. Tiffany is contemplating a return to her mother's home. I find myself at a loss, uncertain of the path forward." And then arrived the inquiry I had been fearing, the inevitable arrival I had anticipated. "Could you lend us your assistance? Only this time. A gentle nudge is all we require. I promise I will repay you." My gaze fell upon him, truly observed. This was my offspring, my little one. The child I once cradled through illness and trepidation now finds himself submerged in decisions I can no longer dictate for him. And yet, I rose gradually, made my way to the front door, opened it and spoke, softly yet resolutely, "Not today." He stood still, his eyes wide and unblinking. "I'm not declaring an absolute no. Rather, I simply mean not today. Only when you grasp the price I paid to remain in this solitary space, while you allowed another to bring me shame in your presence, will you truly comprehend my struggle." He attempted to utter a word, yet I lifted a hand to silence him. "Elevated. I cherished you at every chapter of your existence. I gave of myself without seeking permission. I offered everything until I was no longer seen. And you witnessed it unfold. You allowed it to unfold. Now you must dwell in the silence that you have conjured." A solitary tear traced its path down his cheek. "I'm sorry," he whispered. For the first time in ages I found myself believing him, yet it still fell short. He departed 10 minutes later, neither slamming the door nor stomping his feet, merely walking to the car as if he were a man gradually mastering the burden of his own missteps. That night, tears fell, but they were not for him. I wept for the mother I once was, the one who believed that love was synonymous with boundless forgiveness. That woman had vanished, and in her stead emerged a new presence, one poised to dictate the terms. 3 weeks slipped by, marked only by the absence of calls, the void of texts, and an overwhelming silence. Yet, on this occasion, it lacked the sting of retribution. It resembled the vastness of space, a serene pause amidst the chaos, a moment for him to reflect inwardly, and for me to determine what I required. One morning, just as I was preparing to leave for the post office, a knock echoed through the air. I swung the door wide, and there he stood, Brian, with hair cascading longer and a beard in disarray. Yet his eyes held a distinct quality, devoid of desperation or manipulation. They simply conveyed a weariness, a raw honesty. "May I enter?" he inquired. I inclined my head in acknowledgement. He settled onto the couch once more, yet not as if he were an outsider. This moment feels akin to a man pleading for the ground to support him. I began attending meetings, he remarked. Gatherings of gamblers anonymous take place every Tuesday and Saturday. I remained silent, merely absorbing the words around me. I parted ways with the SUV, severed ties with the credit cards, and secured a position delivering goods under the cover of night. It may be modest, yet it holds value. I'm making an effort, Mom. I truly am. I lingered in anticipation. There was an undeniable sense that something deeper lay beneath the surface. I'm frightened, he confessed. We find ourselves 2 months behind on the mortgage. Tiffany is perpetually engulfed in anger. The boys are attuned to every sound. I wish to hold onto them tightly. He gazed at me unfiltered. I seek assistance, yet this time, my request extends beyond mere financial support. Structure is essential for me. I seek guidance on cultivating responsibility and breaking free from reliance on others. I took a deep breath. This was the defining moment. At the intersection of paths, I rose from my seat, made my way to the kitchen, and came back holding a folder. Within, one finds a payment agreement, a budget plan, a printed list of rehabilitation clinics, and a checklist for separation. He unsealed it with deliberate slowness. His eyes grew wide. What is this? It is my terms, I declared. I will settle the overdue balance on the mortgage, just enough to prevent the house from being seized. Just once, and that's all there is to it. From this moment forward, you hold the reins to your finances. If you make an appearance, I will be there to guide you. However, should you skip a single therapy session, a solitary group meeting, or if I discover even one charge on your account from a betting site, I will not, he interrupted. I remained unyielding. If you seek this assistance, I remarked, you must also disentangle your finances from Tiffany. Entirely. Joint accounts are not permitted. There are no cards to share. Take care of your part. She manages her own affairs. He paused, uncertainty flickering in his eyes. He muttered, "That's not going to go over well." "That decision rests with you," I remarked. "However, if you remain ensnared in her turmoil, I will take my leave." His gaze flicked back to the folder, the accord, the list of tasks to be completed. His hands quivered with an unsteady rhythm. With a subtle inclination of his head, he acknowledged, "Very well." In an instant, I perceived a change unfold before my eyes. Not absolution, not a resolution, yet the essence of accountability. Our hands met in a firm handshake. He affixed his signature to the documents. We established weekly check-ins. The guidelines I abide by. The moment is mine. And then he rose to depart. At the threshold, he paused and cast a glance in my direction. "I never understood the extent to which I relied on you, until you chose to withdraw." A subtle smile graced my lips. "That's the essence of leaning," I remarked. "It functions effectively, until the one supporting you ultimately moves away." He departed without a word. With a decisive click, I secured the door after him. For the first time in years, a sense of victory washed over me. Not through the act of rescuing another, but by redeeming my own spirit. Just one chapter remains, yet there remained one last lesson for them to grasp. The ensuing weeks unfolded with a tranquility that caught me off guard. In a state of unrest, not at this moment, yet more subdued, the atmosphere hung heavy with unease. Yet, an air of expectation lingered. The sensation that washes over you just before the tempest unleashes its fury. The weight of expectation is palpable. The heaviness of an impending transformation looms large. Brian largely upheld his promise. He attended the meetings. He adhered to his financial blueprint. With deliberate care, he began the arduous task of extricating himself from the chaos he had created. Yet it lacked perfection. Nothing ever truly is. The strain in his eyes was unmistakable. His hands continued to tremble as he glanced at his bank account. He yearned to place his trust in others once more. Yet trust was a currency he had exhausted time and again. Yet it was not returning with ease. Tiffany, in contrast, had transformed into someone entirely different. She continued to share her flawless images on social media. Yet the fissures were evident. Her eyes revealed everything as she arrived to drop off the boys. The air crackled with an unmistakable tension between them. Every minor detail ignited her emotions. The manner in which he folded the laundry was incorrect. The manner in which he abandoned his shoes in the hallway. She would lash out at him, then withdraw into her phone as if it could shield her from his presence. Yet, the most revealing moment arrived when Brian ultimately disclosed his choice to separate their finances. He approached it without the flair of cinematic drama. Silence is golden. There shall be no conflicts. A subdued, weary exchange unfolds at the kitchen table. "I can't do this anymore, Tiff," he said, his voice heavy with an emotion I couldn't quite identify. "I can no longer rely on you to fix every problem that arises. I must undertake this task on my own. For my own sake, for the children." For an extended silence, she remained mute. At last, she uttered words in a tone that was entirely unfamiliar to me. It lacked any harshness or cruelty. It was diminutive. "Indeed," she replied in a gentle tone, "I have been anticipating your resolution to everything. I imagined we could simply continue onward. Yet, I find myself questioning whether I possess the strength to continue." At that moment, they chose not to part ways. Yet, there was an undeniable quality in the way he gazed at her. Not with bitterness, but with understanding. He had fulfilled my request. He had resolved to forge his own path. It was a struggle, yet it was unfolding before us. Gradually. What about me? I refrained from extending my assistance. I refrained from extending a shoulder of support. I refrained from intervening. I allowed them to find their own way. A week later, the phone rang, and it was Brian on the other end. The hour was late. As the clock approached p.m., I had just wrapped up a project for my small side business and was tidying up the kitchen when my phone began to ring. The message was far from what I had anticipated. It was not a plea born of desperation. Only he remained. "Mother, I have been contemplating. I desire to relocate." I halted, placing the dish gently into the sink. "Do you truly believe that?" "Indeed," he remarked, his tone unwavering. "The moment has arrived. I can no longer endure residing beneath this roof as if I were merely a visitor. I seek a space to call my own. I must ensure that I nurture my children in the best possible manner. The journey ahead may be challenging, yet I possess the strength to overcome it. I am determined to pursue it." With a deep inhalation, I gathered my thoughts. "You're right," I replied, my voice steady yet restrained. "Believe in your ability to achieve it. I am confident in your abilities." I kept my thoughts to myself, choosing silence over revelation. This was the moment. This marked the initial genuine stride toward the future I had long anticipated. This isn't suited to my tastes, not intended for their kind, yet for him, the path that lies ahead of him, his unwavering steadiness. The call concluded with a vow between us, not towards one another, yet to ourselves. He was destined to succeed. Several days passed before our paths crossed once more. He stood beside his car, parked outside a modest duplex. He appeared transformed, not solely in a physical sense. Although he had put on some weight and tidied himself up a bit, yet an additional shift had occurred. Within him lay a subtle yet profound resilience. He accomplished what I once deemed impossible for him. He refrained from seeking assistance this time. Instead, he extended the keys to his new abode, without any hint of arrogance, not as one who had triumphed, but as one who had truly deserved it. "Mother," he uttered. His voice resonated with a steady clarity. "I accomplished it. I financed this place entirely with my own funds, and I shall take care of the bills. I am about to embark on the journey of fatherhood. A spouse and a son. I shall proceed in my own manner. Excuses are no longer an option." I inclined my head in agreement. I expressed my pride in you. My voice trembled, though the reason eluded me. "I couldn't have accomplished it without you," he confessed, his voice heavy with appreciation. "Yet, it wasn't merely the money you handed over to me. You provided me with the opportunity to rediscover who I truly am, and that sufficed." I embraced him firmly. The warmth of it arose not from pity or regret. It emerged from a wellspring of comprehension. We had each waged this war for what felt like an eternity, standing shoulder to shoulder, yet never truly united. At that moment, we found ourselves firmly planted on our own 2 feet. In that instant, it dawned on me that my efforts to rescue him were no longer necessary. He had rescued himself. I observed him as he drove off, the vehicle gradually vanishing into the distance along the street. In that moment, a sensation washed over me, one I hadn't experienced in what felt like an eternity. Liberty, not solely for my own sake, but for his as well, for each and every one of us. For the first time in years, a profound sense of peace enveloped me. I appreciate your attention. Remember to subscribe, and we invite you to share your story in the comments below. Your voice holds significance,